He was the kind of man who lived in numbers, until one number broke him. A bill. $47,800. He wasn't supposed to see it. It wasn't meant for him. But when he did, he couldn't forget the sound of the little boy's voice whispering, "Mom, please don't cry. I'll get better soon." That's when the billionaire who thought emotions were weakness made the most human decision of his life. If this story touches your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Between Raindrops Stories. Because sometimes the biggest miracles begin with the smallest mistakes. Daniel Cross wasn't used to being caught off guard. As the CEO of Cross Innovations, he lived inside a rhythm of control. 7 a.m. gym, 8 a.m. investor call, 12 p.m. lunch with partners, and by midnight, a quiet apartment overlooking the city he practically owned. Success had cost him many things: sleep, simplicity, and softness. He had traded empathy for efficiency, love for logic. He believed in measurable results, not messy emotions. Until that night. It was 11:47 p.m. Rain whispered against his window, a rhythm that almost sounded like memory. Daniel was finishing his review of quarterly reports when his inbox pinged. From sarah.miller@harborfinance.com. Subject: Invoice attached. He didn't recognize the name, probably another junior accountant from one of the smaller subsidiaries. He clicked it without thinking, expecting numbers, not heartbreak. The email contained a single line. "Apologies, Mr. Cross. Please find the attached file." And one PDF attachment. Invoice, St. Mary's, 2024. He opened it. It wasn't a business invoice. It was a medical bill, dated 2 weeks ago. Patient name, Ethan Miller. Age, 7. Diagnosis, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Outstanding balance, $47,800. At the bottom was a handwritten note scanned into the file. "We'll try to pay more next month. Please don't stop treatment." Daniel frowned, confused. This wasn't an expense report. This was a plea. And attached to it was something else. A short 8-second voice memo. He clicked play. A child's voice, soft, breathy, filled his quiet apartment. "Mom, please don't cry. I'll get better soon." He froze. The voice, that tiny flicker of innocence and pain, seemed to echo against every cold wall he'd built around himself. He listened again, and again, until he realized he was holding his breath. For a long time, he didn't move. The city lights blinked outside his window like heartbeats. Then, slowly, Daniel leaned back in his chair. He opened his drawer, reached for a small photograph, one he hadn't looked at in years. A little girl, brown curls, bright smile. His sister, Emily. She'd been 8 when she died of cancer. The same age as this boy. He had been 13. He remembered the smell of the hospital room, the quiet beeping of the monitors, and the sound of his mother whispering, "Be strong, Daniel. She's watching." He had promised that day he'd never feel that helpless again, and so he'd built his life to make sure of it. Power, money, control, anything but emotion. And yet here it was again, raw, uninvited, and completely real. He looked at the screen again. Sarah Miller. He searched the company directory. Junior accountant, 2 years employed. Annual salary, $46,000. He exhaled sharply. The hospital bill alone was her year's income. She hadn't asked for help. She'd apologized for sending it by mistake. Something twisted inside him. It wasn't pity. It was anger. At himself, at the world, at the unfairness of it all. He stood abruptly, pacing. This woman worked in his system, kept his ledgers balanced, made his empire function, and still couldn't afford to save her child. What kind of world was that? For the first time in years, Daniel shut his laptop before midnight. He poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. Instead, he found himself staring at the photograph again. "Emily," he murmured to the air, "what would you want me to do?" The rain outside grew heavier, the city fading into streaks of gold and gray. And in that storm, a man who lived for order made a decision born purely of emotion. At 2:13 a.m., the lights in his penthouse were still on. His assistant, Julia, received an email marked urgent. "Find me everything on a Sarah Miller, Harbor Finance Division. Current employment details, address, emergency contact, and family information. Do not alert her. DC." He didn't know why he needed to see her. He just knew he couldn't sleep until he did. Meanwhile, across the city, in a cramped two-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, Sarah Miller sat hunched over a kitchen table covered in bills. The fridge hummed quietly beside her, half empty, except for a few leftovers and a bottle of children's medicine. Her laptop blinked with error messages. Her eyes burned from crying. She replayed the mistake in her head again and again. The wrong attachment, the CEO, the fear. What if he saw it? She whispered. But she had no time to dwell. The alarm for her next shift was already set. 2 hours to sleep. In the bedroom, Ethan stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about robots and baseball. She smiled faintly, then covered him with the blanket. "Dream big, my little fighter." At 7 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Ms. Miller, this is Daniel Cross. Please come to my office this morning, 9 a.m. It's important." Her heart dropped. She clutched the phone so tightly her knuckles went white. Oh no, no, no! She felt sick. She was going to lose the job, the only thing keeping them afloat. She didn't even have money for rent next month. At 9 a.m. sharp, Sarah stood in the glass lobby of Cross Innovations, rain-soaked, clutching her worn handbag like armor. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked out of place, a tired mother among polished executives. The receptionist smiled awkwardly. "Mr. Cross is expecting you." As the elevator ascended, Sarah's breath grew shallow. Her mind spiraled. How do you explain a mistake like this? How do you tell a billionaire you're sorry for reminding him that people suffer? The doors opened, and there he was, standing by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city he built. "Ms. Miller," he said softly, without turning, "thank you for coming." She forced a shaky smile. I didn't mean to send that file, sir. I'll delete it from the system immediately. Please don't fire me. I really can't." He turned then, and his expression wasn't stern. It was human. "Sarah, I read the message, and I heard the voice note." Her heart sank. Oh, God. He stepped closer, his tone gentle. "That was your son, wasn't it?" Her throat tightened. "Yes. He's sick?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "Leukemia. We've been fighting it for a year." Daniel exhaled slowly. He had seen numbers, diagnoses, invoices, but he hadn't seen this. A mother trying not to cry in front of her boss. He said quietly, "You shouldn't have to apologize for loving your child." She looked up, startled. He went on, "I'm not here to fire you, Sarah. I'm here because I want to help." Her defenses rose instantly. "Mr. Cross, I can't accept—" He interrupted softly. "This isn't charity. It's what people are supposed to do when they can help." She blinked. "Why would you even care?" He hesitated, then quietly, "Because I've been where you are, and I couldn't save someone once." The air between them shifted, heavy with truth neither expected to share. That afternoon, Daniel made a call to St. Mary's Hospital. By evening, the outstanding balance under Ethan Miller's name was marked paid in full anonymously. She didn't know yet, but when she'd find out, it would change everything for both of them.
The day after Sarah's meeting, the city woke under gray clouds and the smell of rain-soaked concrete. She barely remembered the elevator ride down from Daniel Cross's office, only the strange calm in his voice when he said, "You're not in trouble." His words echoed through her head all night. She kept replaying the moment he looked at her, not like a boss looks at an employee, but like a person seeing someone for the first time. But even that tiny spark of hope drowned under the weight of reality. Her rent was due. Her son's next round of chemotherapy was in 2 days. Her insurance had denied the latest claim. Dreams didn't pay hospital bills. At 8:30 that morning, her phone buzzed. Caller ID. St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Her chest tightened. "Hello?" "Ms. Miller?" the nurse's cheerful voice replied. "We wanted to confirm Ethan's next appointment, and to let you know your outstanding balance has been cleared." Sarah froze. "What?" "Yes," the nurse continued. "Your payment was received in full this morning. Everything's covered." There must be a mistake," Sarah stammered. The nurse chuckled. "If it's a mistake, it's the best one I've ever seen. You're fully paid, ma'am, even future medication through this quarter." The line went silent for a beat. "Do you know who—" Sarah began, but her voice cracked. "Anonymous donor," the nurse said softly. "But they left a note for you." Sarah's hand trembled as she listened. "Some mistakes are meant to happen. A friend." Tears blurred her vision. Her knees weakened until she sank into the nearest chair. A friend. There was only one person it could be. That afternoon, the storm returned. Sheets of rain washed over the city as Sarah stood outside the Cross Innovations Tower again. This time, not out of fear, but out of something she couldn't name. She clutched her umbrella in one hand, her son's hospital receipt in the other. The receptionist looked up, startled to see her again. "Miss Miller?" "I need to see Mr. Cross," Sarah said, voice trembling but firm. "Please tell him it's important." Daniel was in a meeting with his senior board when his assistant entered quietly. "Sir, there's someone here to see you, Ms. Miller." He looked up immediately. "Send her in." "But sir, the meeting—" "Now, Julia." He rose as Sarah entered, soaked, breathless, eyes red from crying. "Sarah," he began carefully, "what happened?" She stepped forward, holding up the folded paper. "This happened." He saw the hospital logo, and realization flickered in his eyes. "You paid it, didn't you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the rain outside and said quietly, "It doesn't matter who did it. What matters is your son gets what he needs." "That's not the point," she said, voice trembling. "Why? Why would you do that?" He turned to face her fully now. "Because I could. Because someone once did the same for me." Her throat tightened. "You barely know me." "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer and to feel helpless to stop it." The words hung between them, fragile as glass. Sarah's eyes filled. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." "I can't repay you." "You don't have to." She shook her head. "No, that's not right. I don't want to be a story you tell at some charity dinner." His expression softened, almost pained. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she demanded. "Pity? Guilt? Some way to feel good about yourself?" He exhaled slowly, his calm breaking just a little. "It's connection. Maybe fate. Maybe a reminder that I still have a heart." That stopped her. She blinked through tears, studying him as if seeing something beyond the suit and composure. Something human. He added, almost to himself, "I lost my sister when she was Ethan's age. I couldn't save her. I told myself I'd never feel that again. Then I read your email." He looked at her, eyes dark with memory. "That's why I did it." Sarah sank into the nearest chair, her shoulders shaking. For the first time, the full weight of what he'd done, what it meant, hit her. "I don't even know how to thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Don't. Just take care of him." She looked up. "That's what I've been trying to do, every day, alone." "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "You can't just say that. You're my boss, not—" He interrupted gently. "Maybe I'm just someone who understands what it feels like to lose sleep over someone you love." Her lips parted, but she couldn't find words. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. They sat in silence for a long while. The rain outside softened from thunder to drizzle, the sound filling the space between their words. Finally, Daniel broke it. "How's Ethan doing today?" She smiled weakly. "He's tired, but he never complains. Said the nurses gave him extra pudding, so he called it a good day." Daniel chuckled softly, a sound she hadn't expected from him. "He sounds like someone I'd like to meet." Her eyes widened. "You? At a children's hospital?" He shrugged. "Why not? I might surprise you." "You already have," she murmured. The next afternoon, he did exactly that. When Sarah arrived at St. Mary's, he found Daniel already there, sitting awkwardly in a too-small plastic chair beside Ethan's bed, listening intently as the little boy explained how his IV machine beeped like R2-D2. He smiled, completely disarmed. The boy's innocence, his strength, felt like sunlight breaking through fog. Sarah watched from the doorway, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time in years, she saw her son laughing, really laughing. Ethan held up a crayon drawing. "I made this for you, Mr. Cross." He smiled, taking the paper carefully. "Is that me?" "Yep, that's you with your fancy hair." Sarah laughed, covering her mouth. "Fancy hair?" Daniel looked at her, mock offended. "I'll have you know this hair costs more than my first car." Ethan giggled. "You're funny for a boss." "Don't tell anyone," Daniel said with a wink. "It'll ruin my reputation." Hours passed like minutes. By the time visiting hours ended, Ethan had fallen asleep, his small hand still gripping Daniel's sleeve. She whispered, "He hasn't trusted anyone new in months." Daniel smiled softly. "He's stronger than most adults I know." She hesitated, then said quietly, "So are you." He looked at her, surprised. "Me?" "You didn't have to show up," she said. "You could have just written a check and forgotten about us. But you came." He paused, his voice almost a whisper. "I think I needed to." They walked to the parking lot in silence, rain misting through the streetlights, puddles shimmering gold beneath the lamps. As Daniel opened his car door, Sarah turned to him. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Of all people, why help me?" He met her eyes. "Because you reminded me what being human feels like." She blinked, stunned. Then he added, "And because sometimes the people who seem to need saving the most are the ones who end up saving you." For a moment, neither spoke. Just the sound of rain and the faint hum of hospital lights behind them. Then Sarah whispered, "Thank you, Daniel." He smiled faintly. "You're welcome. And for the record, it's just Daniel." That night, as Sarah tucked Ethan in, he smiled sleepily and said, "Mom, Mr. Cross is nice. He talks funny, but he's nice." She chuckled. "He's just different." Ethan yawned. "You should be friends with him." She froze, then laughed softly. "Maybe someday." But when she turned off the light and looked at the drawing he'd made, a tall man in a suit, holding hands with a little boy under a rainbow. She felt something stir in her chest. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope.
The days that followed Daniel's hospital visit unfolded like a quiet thaw after a long winter. Sarah's life hadn't suddenly become easy. She still woke at dawn, packed lunches, balanced spreadsheets, and prayed the medicine would keep working. But something had shifted. The world no longer felt entirely against her. Some nights, when exhaustion blurred her thoughts, she'd glance at the framed hospital receipt on the kitchen counter, the one marked "Paid in Full." And in her heart, she whispered a silent thank you to the man she barely knew, but somehow trusted more than most. At Cross Innovations, things began to change too. Daniel, once a storm of intensity, now lingered in moments. He smiled more, spoke softer, listened longer. His assistant Julia noticed first. "You've been different lately," she said one morning, handing him coffee. He raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "You said good morning today. You've never done that in 3 years." He chuckled. "Is that so shocking?" She smiled knowingly. "It's nice to see you care about something other than numbers." He didn't reply. But when she left, his gaze drifted to the small crayon drawing pinned on the edge of his desk, the one Ethan had given him. 2 stick figures under a rainbow, one tall, one small. The words written in crooked letters. "Thank you, Mr. D." It made him smile every single time. It wasn't long before Ethan's hospital visits became part of Daniel's week. He never announced them, he just showed up. Sometimes with a box of crayons, sometimes with puzzles or books, sometimes just to sit and listen to the boy talk about dinosaurs, superheroes, and how brave people are actually just scared people who try anyway. One afternoon, Sarah walked in to find Daniel sitting cross-legged on the hospital floor, Ethan painting his tie with watercolor stars. She froze at the doorway, fighting back a laugh. "I hope that tie wasn't expensive." Daniel looked up, dead serious. "It was, but it's now a limited edition." Ethan grinned proudly. "I made it sparkle." She shook her head. "He's corrupting you." Daniel smirked. "He's improving my taste." After that day, things between them began to blur. The line between professional and personal, between 2 worlds that had no business crossing. He started dropping by her office once in a while, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a quiet, "How's he doing today?" And she'd update him, grateful, yet guarded. One evening, as she packed her bag, he appeared at her door holding 2 paper cups. "Decaf caramel latte, right?" She blinked. "How do you know that?" He shrugged, a faint smile. "You order the same thing every morning at the lobby cafe. The barista knows you by name." Her cheeks flushed. "You pay attention." He met her gaze. "More than I should." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, alive. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's health began to show signs of improvement. The chemo was working, the doctors were hopeful, and every milestone, every small victory, Daniel was there to celebrate. He brought balloons when Ethan's counts improved, ordered pizza for the nurses, and even arranged for the company's private driver to take Sarah to and from the hospital on long nights. At first, she protested. "I can't accept all this, Daniel." He smiled gently. "You can and you should, because none of this is pity, it's partnership." "Partnership?" she repeated, half laughing. "That's not what this feels like." "Maybe not yet, but it will." And then came the night that changed everything. It was late, well past visiting hours. Sarah was sitting by Ethan's bed, the faint beeping of machines the only sound in the room. He'd had a rough day. The treatment left him weak, pale, and quiet. She held his tiny hand and whispered, "I'm right here, baby. Always." Her phone buzzed. "Daniel, you still at the hospital?" She hesitated, then replied, "Yes, he's asleep now." A moment later, another message. "Step outside for a minute." Her brow furrowed. When she opened the door, Daniel was standing there in the dim corridor, holding 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, surprised. "You mentioned you hadn't eaten all day." She shook her head, half laughing. "You're impossible." "I've been called worse," he said with a soft grin, handing her the bag. Inside was her favorite sandwich, turkey, tomato, extra pickles. She stared at him. "How do you know—" "You talk in your sleep during late-night audits," he teased gently. She laughed quietly, covering her face. "You're unbelievable." "So I've been told." They sat together in the hospital hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights above, the world quiet and small around them. For a long time neither spoke. Then Sarah said softly, "Do you ever miss her?" Daniel blinked. "Who?" "Your sister," she said gently. He looked down, his jaw tightening. "Every day." "What was her name?" "Emily," he said after a pause. "She used to make me paper airplanes and tell me one day we'd fly to the stars. I promised her I'd build something great. I just never realized how lonely greatness would be." Sarah's eyes softened. "She'd be proud of you." He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him shifted. "I'm not sure she would, but maybe she'd like who I'm becoming." The clock ticked past midnight. The hospital was still, the kind of stillness that made small moments feel infinite. Sarah leaned back against the wall, sipping her coffee. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think life was just about surviving. Pay the bills, stay strong, don't fall apart. But lately—" He glanced at her. "Lately?" She smiled faintly. "Lately, I've been remembering how to breathe again." He didn't answer. He just watched her, the way exhaustion and hope lived side by side in her face. And for the first time in years, Daniel Cross felt something pure, something terrifying, something real. Peace. When Sarah finally stood to go back into the room, she turned to him. "Thank you. For everything." He smiled gently. "You've thanked me enough." "No," she said softly. "Not like this." She hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss against his cheek. He froze, not from discomfort, but because for the first time in his life a gesture had silenced every defense he'd ever built. When she pulled back, her eyes glistened. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night, Sarah." The next morning, when he walked into his office, Julia noticed something immediately. "Sir," she said, frowning, "you're smiling." He blinked. "Am I?" "Worse," she added, half teasing, "you're humming." He chuckled. "Must be something in the coffee." But later, when he sat at his desk, he found a crumpled napkin in his coat pocket, one that Sarah had scribbled on the night before. "Thank you for seeing us, not as numbers, as people." He traced the words with his thumb, smiling to himself. For the first time, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt human. That evening, Sarah called him. Her voice trembled with joy. "Daniel, they just got the results. The doctors said—" He closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. "He's gonna be okay?" She laughed through tears. "They think so. They really think so." There was silence, the kind that carries every emotion words can't hold. Then Daniel said softly, Tell Ethan I'm proud of him. And tell his mom she's braver than she knows." Sarah smiled through tears. "I think she already knows who taught her that."
Spring came to the city quietly. The rain eased, the days stretched longer, and for the first time in months, the hospital smelled less like antiseptic and more like hope. Ethan's hair was beginning to grow back. He smiled more, laughed louder. And Sarah? She finally slept through the night again. It should have been perfect. It almost was, except for one thing. The closer her son got to healing, the farther she felt herself drifting from Daniel Cross. They still spoke, every few days at first. A call to check on Ethan, a text that said, "Did he like the toy?" or "How's he doing today?" But slowly, those messages grew fewer. It wasn't because Daniel had stopped caring. It was because Sarah had started to pull back. Every time he showed up, with coffee or new books or quiet smiles, she felt her chest tighten. He was kind. He was real. He had changed her life. But he was also her boss. And every good thing that had happened, the bills paid, the visits, the laughter, was because of him, not because of her. And that truth, however unfair, haunted her. One evening, as the hospital discharged Ethan for his final outpatient round, the nurses surprised them with cupcakes and balloons. Daniel was there too, as always, quietly in the background, a steady presence. He watched as Sarah lifted Ethan into her arms, smiling through tears. It was the smile of a mother who had seen darkness and still chosen to hope. When she caught his gaze across the room, he gave her a small nod, as if to say, "You did it." She nodded back. But later that night, when the celebration ended and Ethan fell asleep in the car, Sarah sat alone in the driver's seat, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. "You did it," she whispered to herself. Then her voice broke. "No, he did." The thought hit her harder than she expected. 2 days later, she asked Daniel to meet her, not at the office, not at the hospital, but at a quiet cafe near the park. He arrived early, as always, neat, composed, a familiar warmth in his eyes that she could barely meet. "Everything okay?" he asked, concerned. Sarah smiled weakly. "That's the thing, Daniel. Everything is okay, finally." He frowned slightly. "That's good news, isn't it?" "It is. Which is why I need to reset things." He leaned forward. "Reset?" "I've been thinking," she began, her voice trembling despite her calm tone. "I've been thinking, you've done more for me and Ethan than anyone ever has, and I'm grateful, I truly am. But I can't keep living like this." "Like what?" "Like I owe you everything." He stared at her. "Sarah." "I mean it," she said, cutting him off. "You've been incredible. But every time I look at my son, every time I open the fridge or pay rent or even smile, I know it's because you stepped in. I can't be that woman, the one who survives because someone else decided she was worth saving." He exhaled slowly, trying to process her words. "You think this was about saving you? Wasn't it?" "No." He shook his head, frustration flickering beneath his composure. "I didn't help you because you needed saving. I helped you because I wanted to. Because you and your son reminded me that life isn't just numbers and control. You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost." Her eyes shimmered. "You make it sound noble, Daniel. But what happens when this ends? When you find someone from your world again? When I'm just a story you tell in a few years about the woman who changed you?" His voice softened. "You think so little of me?" "I think you're kind, and I think kindness sometimes makes people believe they're in love when they're just grateful." That one hit him like a punch. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You really believe that's all this is?" She nodded, tears threatening. It has to be. Because if it's more than that, I wouldn't know how to survive it. Silence stretched between them, heavy, aching, unfixable. Daniel leaned back, finally speaking in a low voice. Do you remember what I told you the first night we met? She blinked. That I wasn't in trouble. He smiled faintly. Right. You weren't then, but you are now. Why? Because you think strength means being alone. She swallowed hard, unable to reply. He stood, placing his coat over his arm. Take care of him, Sarah, and yourself. Daniel. He turned to her one last time. You're allowed to let people care about you. That's not weakness. That's living. And with that, he left. Weeks passed. Spring turned to early summer. Ethan was back in school, laughing, running, playing again. Sarah returned to her job at Harbor Finance, quietly grateful to have her life back. But something was missing. Every time her phone buzzed, she half hoped it was him. Every time she passed a cafe, she looked for his reflection. He had disappeared completely. No calls, no visits, just silence. At first, she told herself it was good, that he deserved to move on. But late at night, when Ethan was asleep, she caught herself whispering his name just to remember what it felt like to say it out loud. Daniel wasn't doing much better either. At Cross Innovations, his days had fallen back into routine. Meetings, reports, endless polite conversations that meant nothing. But something inside him had changed, and no amount of work could unchange it. He missed the sound of her laugh, the way Ethan's eyes lit up when he talked about dinosaurs, the way Sarah looked at him like she saw the man behind the fortune. For years, he had built his life to avoid attachment. Now he couldn't imagine living without it. But pride was a cruel companion, and for weeks it kept him silent. Until one morning, a small envelope arrived on his desk. No sender, just a child's handwriting. Mr. Cross, Mom said I could write to you. I'm better now. We got ice cream today. I saved some in the freezer, but Mom says it'll melt before you come. Please come anyway. ITHAN. Inside, taped neatly to the letter, was a crayon drawing. A man and a boy, and beside them, a woman holding an umbrella. All three standing in the rain, smiling. At the bottom, in crooked letters, sometimes rain means new flowers. Daniel sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in his hands. And then, without thinking twice, he stood. That evening, Sarah was in the kitchen cooking pasta when a knock came at the door. She froze. It couldn't be. When she opened it, Daniel stood there, no suit this time, just jeans and a gray sweater, rain still dripping from his hair. She stared at him, speechless. You... He invited me, he said softly, holding up the letter. He said there was ice cream waiting. Her eyes widened, then softened. He actually did. They stood there, neither sure what to say. Finally, she whispered, Why did you come back? He took a step closer. Because you were right. About what? That gratitude and love aren't the same thing, but what I feel for you isn't gratitude. Then what is it? It's the thing I stopped believing in years ago, the thing I didn't know I could feel again. Daniel, he said gently, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here because you fixed me. And because your son's right, sometimes rain does mean new flowers. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she stepped aside. Come in, she whispered. As he walked through the doorway, Ethan's voice called from the living room. "Mom, I told you he'd come." Daniel smiled. "Told you what?" Ethan grinned, running over. "That you'd come back before the ice cream melted." Daniel laughed, ruffling his hair. "Then I guess we'd better hurry." Sarah stood watching them, heart full, tears finally falling, not from sadness, but from relief. Because for the first time in forever, she wasn't surviving anymore. She was living.
The rain had stopped by morning. For once, the city wasn't a blur of horns and chaos. It was soft, quiet, alive in that tender way only mornings after storms can be. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, the kind of dream where everything you lost had found its way home again. And she heard laughter, real laughter, from the kitchen. When she walked in, the sight stopped her cold. Daniel Cross, billionaire, CEO, the man who'd once built empires on precision and pride, was standing barefoot in her kitchen, wearing one of Ethan's superhero aprons and flipping pancakes with the concentration of a heart surgeon. "Morning," he said, glancing up with a grin that could melt glass. Ethan giggled from his seat at the counter. "Mom, he burned the first one." Daniel shot him a mock glare. It was a strategic sacrifice. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, fighting a smile. "You're braver than I thought, Mr. Cross." He looked at her over his shoulder, eyes soft. "It's Daniel. And I told you, breakfast for dinner is my specialty." "It's breakfast for breakfast," Ethan corrected. Daniel winked. "Even better." The morning unfolded like a memory she didn't realize she'd been waiting for. The sound of laughter, the smell of syrup and butter, Ethan talking nonstop about dinosaurs and superheroes, Daniel pretending to take notes like a serious scientist. For the first time in a very long time, Sarah felt what home was supposed to feel like. Safe, full, alive. When Ethan ran off to get ready for school, Daniel began clearing the table. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. He shrugged. "I like doing it." She smiled. "You like being here." He met her eyes. "Yeah, I do." Something passed between them then, a silence thick with everything they hadn't said, everything they were both afraid to admit. Later that afternoon, after dropping Ethan off at school, they walked together through the park. It was the same park she used to take Ethan to when he was too weak to walk more than a few minutes. Now he ran there every weekend, his laughter echoing through the trees. Sarah inhaled the air, cool, clean, full of promise. "I still can't believe it," she murmured. "What?" Daniel asked. "That he's okay, that this is our life now." Daniel smiled. "He's tougher than most people I know." She looked at him. "You helped make that possible." He shook his head. "You did the impossible long before I came along. I just showed up." "You showed up," she repeated, "when no one else did." He stopped walking. "Sarah." She turned to face him, and for a moment they just stood there, surrounded by the whisper of wind through trees, the world holding its breath. "I meant what I said last night," he continued. "I didn't come back out of guilt. I came because I couldn't imagine not coming back." Her heart pounded. "You don't have to say this." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it true." They sat on a bench overlooking the small lake. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "What's that?" she asked.
He smiled faintly. "Something Ethan made me promise to give you." She unfolded it carefully. Another crayon drawing. This one showed 3 stick figures standing under a bright yellow sun. The words written beneath it in crooked letters: "Me, Mom, and Mr. Cross. Family." She blinked rapidly, her throat tightening. "He drew this?" Daniel nodded. "Yesterday. He said it's what he wished for when he blew out his candles." She laughed softly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He's relentless." Daniel's voice softened. "He gets that from his mother." She wiped her tears, trying to smile. "He also thinks you're a superhero." "I'm just a man," Daniel said quietly. "Maybe. But sometimes, that's exactly what heroes are." That evening, Daniel walked them home. Ethan ran ahead, backpack bouncing, waving his arms in excitement. Sarah followed beside Daniel, the rhythm between them easy now, natural. When they reached her door, she hesitated. "You could come in," she said softly. He smiled. "If I want?" "You've been cooking in my kitchen. I'd say it's too late to be polite." He chuckled. "Then yes, I'd like that." Inside, as Ethan settled on the couch with his coloring book, Sarah poured 2 cups of tea. The silence between them was warm, familiar. Finally, she said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd never sent that email?" "All the time," he admitted. "And every time I do, I realize it was never a mistake." "You're still sure of that?" He smiled faintly. "Sarah, you don't question fate when it hands you a second chance." She let out a small laugh. "You really believe in fate?" He leaned closer. "I didn't, until you." Her breath caught. "Daniel," but he gently took her hand. "No speeches," he whispered. "No guilt, just this." He lifted her hand, pressing it to his chest. "Do you feel that?" His heartbeat, steady, strong, echoed beneath her palm. "That's what you changed," he said. "You made me feel again." Her eyes glistened. "And what if it doesn't last? What if we break it?" He smiled softly. "Then we rebuild, together." Ethan looked up from the couch, grinning. "Mom, Mr. Cross?" They turned to him. "Can we keep him?" Ethan asked innocently. Sarah laughed, her cheeks flushing. "Ethan!" Daniel smiled, kneeling beside him. "That depends. Do you think your mom would let me stay?" Ethan shrugged. "She smiles when you're here, so yeah." Sarah met Daniel's gaze, and for the first time, she didn't look away. "Then stay." The days that followed blurred into something soft and beautiful. They cooked together, worked together, laughed together. And in the quiet moments, after Ethan fell asleep and the city lights flickered outside the window, they'd sit side by side, just being. No labels, no expectations. Just 2 souls who had found each other in the most unlikely way. Months later, on a golden afternoon in early autumn, they returned to the same park, the one where Daniel had first told her he came back because he couldn't imagine not coming back. Ethan was chasing pigeons near the fountain, laughing. Sarah leaned against the railing, watching him. "He's unstoppable," Daniel said with a smile. "Wonder where he gets that from," she teased. He turned to her, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "You." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "We've come a long way." "Yeah? And I don't ever want to go back." Then slowly he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah froze. "Daniel." He opened it. Inside was a simple silver ring, elegant but understated, exactly like her. "You once told me you don't accept charity, so I'm not offering you help." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm offering you partnership, permanence, a reason to believe that sometimes mistakes can lead to miracles." A soft wind brushed past them, rustling the leaves. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. "Yes," she whispered finally. "Yes." Months later, on their wedding day, small, quiet, filled with laughter, Ethan stood proudly beside them, the ring-bearer in a tiny suit and mismatched socks. As they exchanged vows, the rain began to fall outside, light and warm, not a storm, just a reminder. When the ceremony ended, Daniel looked up at the sky and smiled. Sarah squeezed his hand. "Rain again," she whispered. He smiled. "Between raindrops, right?" She nodded. "Between raindrops."
And as the rain kissed the city, the three of them stepped outside. A mother, a son, and a man who had once thought he was beyond saving, now standing together beneath a single umbrella. Because love doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it begins with the wrong email and ends with a single word that changes everything. Stay.
Some stories don't begin with a plan. They begin with a wrong number, a late-night call, or an email sent to the wrong inbox. And somehow, they lead exactly where they were meant to. Daniel thought his life was too busy for miracles. Sarah thought she'd run out of them. And Ethan? Well, he never stopped believing in them. Maybe that's the lesson, that the right people don't always arrive when we want them to. They arrive when we need them to. Not every savior wears a cape. Sometimes they show up with a cup of coffee and the courage to care. Because kindness, the kind that asks for nothing, has a way of finding its way back home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. Tell us in the comments, do you believe some people are meant to find each other, even by accident? Because maybe, between raindrops, between mistakes, between heartbreak and healing, we all find our way home.